G'day guys, my name's Walter and welcome to Cozzy TV. Today guys, we are going to talk about the sensitive topic of racism in Australia. Today I will talk about my experience in school, how I dealt with it, and also how I got over it. I will also talk about some words that you might hear when it comes to racism against Asians. I will also talk about what you should do if you feel like you are a victim of racism. So stick around and remember guys that this is sort of a sensitive video. So everyone has their own opinion and everyone has their own experiences. If you're lucky, you may not have experienced racism, but many people have. So let's get started. First, let's talk about my experience with racism. So just a brief story about me. I grew up in Australia from when I was a baby. So I experienced a lot of different kinds of people from different backgrounds and different cultures, etc. Now, I don't think I really received any style of racism until I was maybe grade 4 or grade 5 of primary school. I first went to school in Nowra in New South Wales, then moved to Canberra, and then from grade 4 onwards I moved to a little place near Gatton. Now, there was probably my first experience with racism because I was the only Asian boy amongst a small school. At that time, there weren't really too many Asian families or even Asian holiday workers, so I was a pretty easy target. However, this is in probably the late 90s and early 2000s when I started receiving this kind of racism. 20 odd years have passed now, so it is a little bit different in schools, but let me explain more. In high school, I probably received the most racism ever during that time. Now that's because in high school, kids tend to be a bit more mean. They usually profile you for what you look like. In my high school, there were about 3 or 4 different Asian people as I can remember. I wasn't exactly the most popular kid in school, so I got picked on a lot. Now, I'm not playing the victim, I'm not saying, poor me, boo-hoo, but it did affect me a lot during high school. I was sort of ashamed to be Asian, and to be honest with you, I didn't really embrace my Korean heritage for a long time. So that's the main way it affected me. I was sort of ashamed. After I graduated high school, I definitely saw a drop in racism towards me. When I went to college, I met a lot of people from diverse backgrounds, and they were more accepting to the fact I was Asian or Korean. Between high school and my early 20s, the only sort of racism I sort of received was from acquaintances who for some reason thought it was good to try and provoke me racially. It was just who they are as people. It wasn't until I moved to the city where I met a lot of Korean people is when I started to embrace my Korean heritage again. A lot of Koreans were super nice to me, offering to help me whenever I needed help or just wanting to talk and be friendly. Since then, I really embraced who I was, and I was happy to consider myself Korean and Australian. How I got over my problem was simply because I started to realize why people are racist, and this is something I'll cover now. The main reason why people, I believe, are racist is because they feel threatened in some way by your culture. Now, what I mean by this is a long time ago in the early 90s, Asians were the main target of racism. Now, this is why I can see many Koreans were scared or they have this preconception about Australia. In the early 90s, a lot of Asian immigrants, especially Chinese, were moving to Australia to start up businesses. I didn't really see too many Koreans until my late teens. So in the early years of my life, it was a lot of Chinese people moving to Australia. Now at that time, there was this kind of belief that Chinese were taking over businesses and also taking people's jobs. The Australian people at that time, I guess, were still unfamiliar with a lot of Asian culture, and they felt a little threatened. In my opinion, and I think in many other people's opinion as well, racists are uneducated when it comes to society and the world. They are very small-minded and are very stubborn. I don't know all the reasons why some people might be racist, but here are some of the reasons that I've looked up and also that I've experienced as well. Now, let's talk about some words that you might hear or people might say that are considered racist towards Asians. Now, before I say any of these words, just a reminder that this is a sensitive topic. They are quite racist words, and I'm only repeating them for the sake of education and not for any other reason. So, the first word I was called when I was younger was the word gook. Now, this is one of the strongest Asian slang racist terms, and it's not good to hear. I hate hearing it as well. But this is a word that you might want to look at when someone is being racist towards you. An older word is 칭정, all right? This was probably the most original racist term that many Asians received. I received it as well. People would also comment, obviously, on our eyes. Now, our eyes are considered small in the Western world. So as we all know, when people push their eyes back, that would be considered a racist slur or a racist act towards Asian people. Other words to describe me when I was growing up would be things regarding to how flat my face was, or that like I look the same as every other Asian person. You know, in high school, whenever there was the Japanese exchange students coming to my school, people would automatically think that I'm Japanese. So, how do you know the difference between what's joking and what's more aggressive? Now, it does really depend on the person you're speaking to. If you are very good friends with somebody, depending on who they are, they might make a sort of racial slur as a joke. Now, it is sort of bad to hear, but there are people out there that do that. Now, they're not meaning anything bad by it, but it's just their kind of humor. But consider how close you are with that person. Now, when someone is more aggressive to you, maybe saying it in quite an aggressive voice, that's when you should look out for this situation. Now, the most important thing to remember, usually, regardless of people's opinions, outspoken racists are usually outnumbered in public. So, if you feel like you've been racially profiled or someone is being racist against you, more likely, and I think especially in Australia, people will support you. Now, if we are going to be honest, racism will probably never be deleted from life. However, we are moving towards steps where people are becoming more protective of their friends and also the people around them. If this were to happen to you, then by all means, I would ignore it. And remember, the reason why you should ignore it as much as it does hurt you is that they are uneducated about the world. And basically, they are letting out their aggression onto you. Sadly, this is the case, but the best way is not to react and ignore. Hopefully, someone in the same area as you will also help you out. What happens if you feel like you've been racially profiled or being a victim of racism at work? Now, in Australia, they have very strict rules against this kind of thing. So please, if you feel like you are a victim of racism, please see your HR department within your company, business, hotel, cafe, whatever, or speak to your manager. Now, what is racism like in Australia these days? Now, as I mentioned, it is in Australia, but this is something that you shouldn't let scare you from going to Australia. However, as I mentioned before, racists are dramatically outnumbered, and most of the time someone will support you or back you up. So guys, I hope this helped you a little bit in regards to racism within Australia. Now, everyone has their own opinion, and obviously even racists do as well. You're not alone. I have experienced it as well, and I will probably experience it in the future. However, together we stand as one, and I am here to support you if you ever feel that you have been a victim of racism. Now guys, remember to always like and subscribe, but most importantly, like I always say, stay positive.